Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 347 of the Prancing Pony podcast, where, owing to dissensions among the co-hosts, the podcast is being divided into three.
And I suppose you think you're going to get to keep all three of those Palantir you have in your basement?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're mine.
All right.
Yeah. Sue me.
I'm watching you, Sisto. I'm watching you.
All right.
Not with a Palantir, though.
No, apparently not. Good luck with that.
Pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I am Don Marshall, the obscure Lord of the Rings facts guy, and I am here with the man of the West who is hoarding all of the Seeing Stones, Alan Sisto.
Might as well. I mean, you can have Rhudaur. How's that? Sound good?
Yeah, okay, fine.
All right, folks, join us as we watch Arnor disappear during our look at Appendix A1 Little 3, covering the North Kingdom of Arnor and the Heirs of Isildur.
The titles don't get any better, but
Nope.
the content sure does. We are fighting the long defeat here, it seems. Folks, No matter how you got here, you are all welcome here in the common room at the Prancing Pony podcast. We are reading and talking our way through Middle-earth with plenty of speculation and bad jokes along the way.
Of course, but we love our deep dives into the lore, discussing our favorite themes, and a whole lot more.
But we do try to keep it light and fun, the opposite of a Palantir, like a couple of friends chatting at a pub, and we are very glad you've joined us.
And I'm sure you'll be glad you joined as well, just as soon as we're done with Don's bad jokes. But before we get to tonight's chapter discussion, it is time to welcome a guest to the common room in one of my favorite segments, The North Wing. And today I'm pleased to bring you a new installment of The North Wing. Now, we know that Bartleman Butterbur had a room or two in the North Wing at the Prancing Pony Inn that he made special for hobbits. Well, this is the PPP's place made special for some of our listeners to give us all a chance to get to know them. Now, rooms at the North Wing are a little hard to come by these days, so only our patrons at the Bombadil's Bequest and Círdan's contribution tiers are eligible. So if you'd like to be one of the next patrons to join us, be sure to check out patreon.com/prancingponypod. There is still a bit of a waiting list for the North Wing right now, but I will get to them all soon, and maybe some of them will even be with one of my co-hosts. For now, though, I'm running it solo, but please welcome tonight's guest to the North Wing, Sean Verinder.
Hi, Alan.
Hi, Sean. Thanks for joining me. And I'll tell you what, the other folks don't know this yet, but I'm going to fill them in. You and I have had to schedule this probably a half a dozen times, and then I turned up like half an hour late today. So thank you for
No
your
worries
patience.
at all.
I really appreciate it. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What do you do? And, well, of course, do your loved ones merely tolerate your Tolkien nerdiness, or do they share it with you to some degree? That sort of thing.
So I live just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in a town called Exton.
Okay.
And I work as a mechanical engineer for the U.S. Navy, civilian, working primarily on additive manufacturing, so 3D printing, and installation of additive manufacturing equipment on Navy ships.
Okay. So we're not going to be 3D printing any large caliber artillery guns on the next battleships or anything. Those aren't going to be printed out of resin or anything.
Can't say.
Can't say. Best answer, actually. Best answer. I see the Penn State, because of course I'm getting to do this on video. I see the Penn State logo on your shirt. I'm imagining that's then where you went to study mechanical engineering?
Yep, indeed. Undergrad and grad school.
Oh, right on. Nittany Lions. All right. Now, of course, we have to ask you the question that we ask everybody who comes here to the Prancing Ponies Common Room. When and how did you first discover Tolkien's works? And what was your experience like? And I think the most important part of the question that I tend to let people slide on, I'm not going to let you slide on this one. Why is it that you keep coming back? What brings you back and back and back again to Middle-earth?
So I was introduced to it through a friend in junior high, I guess, back around the time when Fellowship was coming out. So I think a lot of people my age, kind of the movies introduced me to the world. I kind of didn't really feel interested initially, but then I had my uncle, when Two Towers was coming out, he's like, you have to go see this with me.
Oh, yeah.
So I have a twin brother. So he and I went with my uncle and saw it, and I was hooked. So, of course, I had to watch Fellowship first. So then started reading the books, started with The Hobbit, then Lord of the Rings, and just devoured them. And then in my freshman year of college, I took on the Silmarillion, and I loved it. So, and after that, I would say that I was kind of a pretty in-depth fan, but my fandom really expanded when I came across Pranks of Pony podcast back in 2020. So very early days of the pandemic. You and Sean kept me company.
It turns out we kept a lot of people company. I remember when that first happened, I think our fear was that, but people only listen to podcasts on their commute and at the gym. So we're toast. Like all the podcasts of the world are going to die. And it turned out to be the complete opposite. We got to help people sort of get through a very difficult time.
So then getting back to your question about what keeps me coming back is that I think through the introduction to the wider fandom that I gathered from listening to Pranks of Pony, I've just kind of gained like a deeper understanding and deeper appreciation for it, and realized like there are so many different readings you can have of the stories. So then it really rewards somebody for coming back with your new perspective, even after a short amount of time, to kind of read the stories again and apply the things that have happened outside of reading the books to your understanding of the themes and everything. So I think the fact that it's kind of a self-renewing resource is really what keeps me coming back.
I like that viewpoint, and I certainly share that. I mean, as you know, the last 6 years have shown me going through the Lord of the Rings, it doesn't matter how many times you read it, there's always something new. And it may be that, it's something else you read, maybe in the letter or maybe in Unfinished Tales, but it also may be an experience you've had. Like you said, you bring your life to the text every time that you read it. And that experience is going to make the next reading experience a little bit different and a little bit richer. So what is your favorite book in the Legendarium and why? And then if you have one, what's your favorite non-Legendarium work?
Oh, man. So favorite book would have to be Lord of the Rings. Close second is The Silmarillion. I like the kind of the mythological scale of that. Was always kind of in elementary school and everything, kind of fascinated by like the Greek and Roman myths and everything. But then having something that is kind of so tailored to my Anglo-Saxon background it kind of tugs at my heartstrings a little bit, I guess.
I can understand why. That makes sense. Have you read any non-Legendarium works?
I've started to. I would say probably the one that I relate to the most is Leaf by Niggle.
Oh,
just because I a dyed-in-the-wool perfectionist. So that really spoke to me on so many levels.
Got to get that leaf just right.
Exactly.
And it's one of 1,000. I got to get the other 999 just right as well.
Yep.
No, I can't go to that trip yet. No, I can't go yet. Yeah.
Right.
I hear that. I do. Any Tolkien goals that you'd like to share? Maybe tracking down a book for your collection, if that's something you do, or going to a moot, something along those lines.
So I've definitely started collecting, not any older editions or anything like that.
Good luck with you if you do, because those are...
I've kind of been stocking my shelf with especially the History of Middle-earth copies as they're being republished here. I have the paperback editions. They're awful thick. So, and I hate to crack a spine on it, but it's like so difficult with those.
Yeah, they're thick, and then you sort of have the paperback ones. I think I know which ones you're talking about. They're tough to do. Yeah, I'm hopeful that it does look like the new editions, the new box set editions of History of Middle-earth, they're going to be really nice and readable.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because prior to that, the only version I had was the 3-volume one, which is on the very thin paper.
Yeah.
And I just, it easily tears. It's hard to, and you can't even open it up because each volume is like 1,500 pages. It's ridiculous.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Cool.
And then, so I've actually been turned on to attending moots too.
Yes.
This past June was actually my first myth moot.
Well, you're in the right part of the country to make it relatively easy.
Yeah, exactly. Incidentally, I actually sat in the row behind you while we were watching that Born of Hope fan film.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
Yeah,
I remember that.
That was a good time.
That was a good time. I wonder what hilarious thing they're going to show this time around. I mean, not that Born of Hope was hilarious, but the way we did it, sort of a Mystery Science Theater 3000 approach.
Yeah.
The one thing that it sounds like you missed, because it was, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, was the Soviet Fellowship of the Ring.
I've heard so many things about that.
Watching that with 50 people late at night is an experience not to be missed. It'll be good, whatever it is. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well this year. Now for our lightning round, or at least presumed or intended to be lightning round of quick questions and answers. What's the one place and time in Middle-earth you wish you could live? Not just visit, but live.
time would be soon after the founding.
Mm-hmm.
And Rohan. Rohan has always fascinated me.
Oh, yeah.
Just kind of like, I know we get a little bit in Unfinished Tales and everything, but there's just so much of that's unexplored, and just, I don't know, something about it speaks to me.
So Eorl would be your lord, and you would have been part of that transition from the Eotheod up north in the Vales of Anduin to Kalanardhon and Rohan. That's a nice choice. I like that. Who is your favorite elf from the First Age? Completely shifting gears here. And why is it Finrod?
So everybody answers Finrod. I was trying to think of something different.
You totally can. I would recommend maybe not Meiglin, but really anybody else is fine.
Very true.
Even Fëanor, I won't give you a hard time.
So I would say Fingolfin, because he went one-on-one with Morgoth.
Yeah.
And though he didn't live to tell the tale, certainly made a showing of it.
And Morgoth went halt ever after. Yeah,
indeed.
Absolutely. Oh, that's definitely right up there with Finrod in my book. This one's really a cheat. I mean, I suppose you could answer it incorrectly, but Balrog wings, actual or metaphorical?
Metaphorical.
Yeah, there we go. So we're just doing a straw poll here on this show. I'm sure our audience isn't biased at all on that one. All right, well, maybe I'll change this question then. One does not simply walk into Mordor, but if you could, who would you rather have at your side? Turgon or Finrod? See, I decided not to include Fingolfin because he was your favorite First Age elf, and you would have obviously chosen him. I cannot choose the First Age elf in front of you.
Okay, Vizzini.
Turgon or Finrod?
I would say Turgon, because he did so well holding out against Morgoth.
Oh, I sure did.
Until the very end. So I would say, I think Finrod would be a good companion, but I would say Turgon.
Yeah. I mean, Finrod will throw himself into the first werewolf that you run into, but then he'll be gone.
Yep.
Yeah, Turgon, not a bad call. Favorite author or book other than Tolkien?
I would have to say Terry Pratchett, the Discworld series. Yeah, it's always good for a laugh, and Good Omens too. With his co-writing with Neil Gaiman. Yeah.
Fantastic choice. Can't disagree with you on that. Well, thank you, Sean. I really have enjoyed having you here in the North Wing. After all that wait, thank you so much.
I greatly appreciate it, Alan. Thank you.
You got it, Sean. Well, folks, it's time for all of us to head back to the common room and join the rest of the listeners. But Sean, I hope I will see you back here in the common room at our next Questions After Nightfall or something along those lines. And for now, folks, we return you to the podcast in progress.
Always a huge fan of the North Wing. Would love to be on it myself, Alan. A few times. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, hint, hint.
Well, you'll definitely be on it, not as a guest, but you're going to be hopefully sitting with me and quizzing some of our North Wing guests in the very near future.
I mean, I could do the trivia as well. I am the obscure Lord of the Rings facts
You
guy.
are. I might have to defer to you on that. That'll be a lot of fun.
Ooh, or can I write all of the questions? And I'll just make them
Sure, why not?
harder
Hey, less work for me. I'm not going to say no.
All right. Well, I am going to put you to work now. Would you mind bringing us our first reading for the day?
I would not mind at all, Don. At its greatest, Arnor included all Eriador, except the regions beyond the Lune, and the lands east of Greyflood and Loudwater, in which lay Rivendell and Hollin. Beyond the Lune was Elvish country, green and quiet, where no men went. But dwarves dwelt, and still dwell, in the east side of the Blue Mountains, especially in those parts south of the Gulf of Lune, where they have mines that are still in use. For this reason, they were accustomed to pass east along the Great Road, as they had done for long years before we came to the Shire. At the Grey Havens dwelt Círdan the shipwright, and some say he dwells there still, until the last ship sets sail into the west. In the days of the kings, most of the high elves that still lingered in Middle-earth dwelt with Círdan or in the seaward lands of Lindon. If any now remain, they are few. The North Kingdom and the Dunedain. After Elendil and Isildur, there were 8 high kings of Arnor. After Eärendil, owing to dissensions among his sons, their realm was divided into 3, Arthedain, Rhudaur, and Cardolan. Arthedain was in the northwest and included the land between Brandywine and Lune, and also the land north of the Great Road as far as the Weather Hills. Rhudaur was in the northeast and lay between the Etten Moors, the Weather Hills, and the Misty Mountains, but included also the angle between the Horwell and the Loudwater. Cardolan was in the south, its bounds being the Brandywine, the Greyflood, and the Great Road. In Arthedain, the line of Isildur was maintained and endured, but the line soon perished in Cardolan and Rhudaur. there was often strife between the kingdoms, which hastened the waning of the Dunedain. The chief matter of debate was the possession of the Weather Hills and the land westward towards Bree. Both Rhudaur and Cardolan desired to possess Amansul, Weathertop, which stood on the borders of their realms, for the Tower of Amansul held the chief Palantir of the north, and the other two were both in the keeping of Arthedain. There we go.
Well, it's not a list of a bunch of kings.
That's true. We're better start than that, huh?
Yeah. We are skipping the lines of kings of Arnor and Arthedain, the line of chieftains for the remaining Dunedain, as well as, I believe it's the line of kings and ruling stewards of Gondor, which Tolkien lists.
Exactly.
Riveting fiction stuff, guys. Really got to hand it to him.
It's nothing personal, except for you, Castamere. It's definitely personal for you.
Yep.
It's just that the ones who are ruling when historical events are taking place will be talked about in the context of those events. In other words, we'll get to Eärendil, Arvedui, Romendikil, Eldakar, Arnor, Círdan, and all the rest as we get to their stories instead over these next several episodes.
However, with all of that said, we start tonight's reading at a section on Eriador, Arnor, and the heirs of Isildur, and it leads by giving us a little bit of a geography lesson on the sort of region of Eriador.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, Eriador is a geographical region, while Arnor is the northern kingdom. However, there's a lot of overlap we'll see, but not entirely.
Right. So let's start with the bigger picture. Okay, literally, that's Eriador. It's described as the land between the Ered Luin to the west and the Misty Mountains to the east. The southern border of it is the Grey Flood and its tributary, the Glanduin.
So if you look at a map of Middle-earth, either in your book or the Lord of the Rings Project.com.
Right. Now, the map in Karen Wynn Fonstad's excellent Atlas of Middle-earth is sadly cut short at the south end, and so it doesn't really help for this particular illustration. Her map on the kingdoms, which we'll get to, it's on page 55, at least in the first edition. That one's very helpful.
It is, yeah. You'll see the big mountain ranges to the east and west. We're going to start there. Since Eriador is only the land between those two ranges, that means that Lindon, both For Lindon in the north and Har Lindon in the south, are not part of Eriador.
Right. And then that southern border, if you look at the map, you'll see it's really a southeastern border for the most part. You'll see where the Grey Flood runs southwest, reaching the sea just beyond the haven of Londair. It splits Minhiriath and Enedwaith.
Enedwaith being in the south of the Grey Flood, this is not part of Eriador, but Minhiriath to the north of the river, that is part of the region.
Correct. Now, if you look at that map, you follow the Grey Flood up to Tharbad. That's where the north-south road crosses the river. You'll see that it is fed by the Bruinen, that's the Loudwater, and that continues almost in a straight line to the northeast. It's also fed, though, by the Glanduin, which goes due east, and it's that river, the Glanduin, that marks the rest of the southern border of Eriador. That means that Eregion, which is to the north of Glanduin, is in the region, but Dunlin to the south is not.
And just like last week, there will be a test. However, this one, you have to recreate the map based entirely on our verbal descriptions.
Correct.
So now that you have a very clear picture.
A crayon. While blindfolded.
Oh, God, no, Alan. Please pump the brakes. All right. So now that we have a much clearer picture and a much safer car of the geographical region of Eriador, we move to the kingdom of Arnor's borders, and you'll see that they overlap a lot, but not completely. So we are told that the regions beyond the Lune were not part of Arnor. The Lune is the river that runs mostly north to south between the hills of Evendim and the Ered Luin until it empties out into the Gulf of Lune near Mythlond, which is the Grey Havens. That's the Gulf. It's an east-west Gulf.
Right. So the river runs north-south and the Gulf cuts to the west. But that means that the land between the Ered Luin and the River Lune was not part of Arnor. Okay, so that's part of Eriador, but not part of Arnor. For the other part of Eriador that's not Arnor, the lands east of Grey Flood and Loudwater. So go back to that map where we were looking at the Grey Flood and the Glanduin and describe the Glanduin as the southern border of Eriador.
Yeah, that little wedge of land from Swanfleet at the sort of southwest corner to Moria at the southeast corner, and then Rivendell at the north end, that is all part of Eriador, but not Arnor.
That's right. Now that area includes Rivendell as well as the land of Eregion or Holland, where the elves had a huge presence in the Second Age under Celebrimbor in Ost-in-Neville.
Yeah, we are given a brief description of what one of these sort of non-Arnor parts of Eriador is like. The land on the west of Lune is said to be elvish country, but dwarves live in the eastern portion of the Ered Luin, especially in the southern portion.
Right. Now, if you remember, in the First Age, dwarves had two mighty dwellings in these same blue mountains, Belagost and Nogrod. Now, we're also told a little bit about Círdan and the Grey Havens. Now, of course, we spent a ton of time here praising Círdan in the last episode of Season 8, so we'll resist the temptation to spend another 30 minutes telling you just how awesome he is.
We could probably make an entire podcast about it, but we move on to the star of tonight's show. It's the North Kingdom.
That's right.
After just a mere mention of the 8 high kings of Arnor following Isildur, we jump straight into the split of that kingdom.
That's right. Now, before we dive in, it is worth reading a quick note from Christopher Tolkien on this entire section from here to the end of tonight's episode. And this is found in The Peoples of Middle-earth, that's volume 12 of History of Middle-earth, in part 1 of that book, section 9, on the making of Appendix A. There, Christopher writes, "There is scarcely any rejected preliminary material before the final typescript, from which section 1(3), that is what we're covering tonight, of Appendix A was printed, Eriador, Arnor, and the heirs of Isildur. On the evidence of the extant texts, this final typescript was the very one in which my father first set down the history of the North Kingdom in continuous narrative form. The story of Arvedui and the Lossoth, the snowmen of Forchel, wrote itself in precisely the form in which it was presented."
So, in other words, don't expect us to find some hidden gems in the drafts on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. The draft was the final on this. It's pretty amazing.
This is it. Yeah. Now, this split is mentioned as being caused by dissension among his sons, and there is no suggestion anywhere as to what that dissension was, or where or why Eärendor, the last high king of Arnor, chose, after 800 years of unified rule, to just split the kingdom between them.
Seriously, I guess he just didn't want to decide. Or maybe he did give it to his eldest and his other brother's like, oh, no, you're not doing that. Who knows what it looked like? That would be a very interesting story. Like, what was the dissension? What was it that caused them? Who knows?
We've done enough. I've written enough fan fiction on this podcast.
Yes, you have, Don. Yes, you have. Now, Hammond and Skull take us on a very interesting digression here into the primary world. They talk about how this is the one exception to the general rule in Tolkien's Legendarium that the eldest son, or in Númenor, in some cases, the eldest child, inherited the entirety of the kingdom. And that's where we look at the primary world. They look at similar instances in medieval Europe, and they cite a couple. William the Conqueror, having done all the William the Conquering bit, gave his original inheritance of Normandy to his oldest son, Robert, but he gave England, his newfound conquest, to his second son, William II, known as William Rufus or William the Red.
Then there's Louis the Pious, king of the Franks, and son of Charlemagne, who created different succession plans while he was alive, with the result that his sons not only fought each other, but also attacked their father, each vying to secure a larger share of patrimony. So, like those kingdoms, Arnor was split into 3 realms.
Yep.
Arthedain, Rhudaur, and Cardolan.
Right. Now, Arthedain was the largest and longest surviving of the 3, so of course, we'll get to that in a little bit. Instead, we're going to start with Rhudaur.
Rhudaur was in the northeast and was between the Etten Moors, the Weather Hills, and the Misty Mountains, but also included the angle between the Harwell and the Loudwater.
Now, to help you picture this, remember that the Weather Hills are a range that runs north to south, ending at the south end with the peak of Amansul. Those hills form the border of Rhudaur, but they belonged to Arthedain. Now, the Etten Moors are hills that run west to east. They end at the Misty Mountains at the east end, and they are to the north of Rivendell. So that's sort of the southwest and northeast corners of the realm.
Yeah, the east road kind of forms the southern boundary. So until you get to the Harwell, at which point Rhudaur also includes the Angle, an area of land that is south of the road between the rivers Methaethel and Bruinen.
Right. Now, a little bit of word nerdery on Rhudaur. It is Sindarin, and it contains the Lenited form Daur of tower, meaning forest. You might remember Taur Nufuin, forest under night.
That Rue element is interesting. Before Parma El Delambaron 17 was published, both Hammond and Skull and David Salo suggested that this initial element was a prefix form of Rune, meaning east, thus east forest, which in this case certainly fits.
And that does make a lot of sense. But interestingly, in Parma El Delambaron 17, the words and phrases in The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien actually tells us that the element Rue here means evil. Now, I have to admit, part of me thinks that seems like an unlikely name for the Dunedain to give to their own land. So maybe it's a later name. I mean, like we talked about Akallabeth. The Númenóreans didn't call the island of Númenor Akallabeth until after it had fallen, because it literally means she that is fallen. So maybe here, this was only the evil forest after it fell to Angmar. I don't know. But
this feels like sort of a Mirkwood, Greenwood kind of thing. Like,
maybe.
when did it happen? Why did it happen? It's okay. Well, the names change. It's all the same, only the names have changed.
There you go.
Cardolan was to the south of Rhudaur. Its western boundary was the Brandywine from the bridge down to the sea. Similarly, its eastern boundary was the Harwell from the last bridge to the sea.
That's right. Now, the northern border was just the East Road. And if you look at a map, you'll figure out why no southern border is mentioned. That's because it's simply the ocean, right? I mean, it's a wedge of land that runs down to the southwest as those two rivers sort of parallel each other once the Brandywine turns to the southwest. Now, a little word nerdery on Cardolan. It is also Sindarin, not a surprise. The name is not actually glossed anywhere, but Hammond and Skull, David Salo, and Paul Strack have all suggested that it means Red Hill country or Red Hill land, from the elements Caran, meaning red, which we see in Caradhras or Redhorn, as well as Carcharoth, the red maw. The element Dol, meaning head or hill, like Dol Amroth, Dol Guldur, Mindalwyn, etc. And then the IAN suffix, which means land or country. We see variants of that in Ithilien, Beleriand, Lorien, and others.
You just love your word nerdery.
I'm
even
digging into it more. Yeah, absolutely.
This is wild. I love it.
I totally used to defer to Sean on that because he's so much better. He's still better at that than I am. But I'm having to sort of step up in his absence and sort of fill that role. And I've been trying to embrace it a lot. Yeah.
You've picked up the mantle quite well. So just to kind of provide some context, the reason we started with these two and their geography was because of what is not in either of them.
That's right.
That is Anúminas, the Tower of Elostirion, and Amon Sul. What did those three places have in common?
Well, they had two things in common, Don. One, they were all in the realm of Arnor, and second, they each had a Palantir. So, yeah. So Elostirion and Anúminas were never going to be in dispute. They're deeply in the realm of Arthedain. But the Weather Hills were the western border of Rhudaur and just across the road from the northern border of Cardolan. Remember, the northern border of Cardolan is that east road. So it's right there in the southeast corner of Arthedain, right next to both Rhudaur and Cardolan. And neither realm was thrilled with this arrangement.
Not happy at all. We said we'd get to Arthedain, so let's do that.
All right.
Its western border is the Lune, which was the western edge of the Kingdom of Arnor, and its eastern border is the Brandywine River. The next line can be a little bit confusing. The land north of the Great Road as far as the Weather Hills. But I hear you ask, the Weather Hills are barely north of the road.
Now, here's where we have to go back to the idea of the eastern border being the Brandywine. If you look at the Brandywine south of the bridge and then south of the Shire, it turns to the southwest and flows to the sea. It is that portion west of the Brandywine that belongs to Arthedain, like the Shire. East of the Brandywine, though, their region extends north again. So no, east of the Brandywine, but south of the Great Road, that's Cardolan. But if you go north of the Great Road, then east of the river is theirs, with the eastern part of that boundary being the Weather Hills. So you've got a kind of an extension to the north, but that extension, and it's a big extension because it runs all the way up to the Bay of Foreshell, that extension only goes so far east as the Weather Hills. So it is a little confusing, but that's how we're able to include like Evendim and Anúminas, Fornost and the North Downs. That is all part of Arthedain, all the way up, like I said earlier, to the Bay of Foreshell. And I know I said Foreshell, and that's because it's a lot easier on everybody's ears. It is Foreshell, but we're going to say Foreshell just because it's easier. We're lazy.
We've got some more word nerdery, Alan. Arthedain, pretty straightforward. Sindarin for realm of the Edain, with the element Arth, meaning region or realm, and then Edain, well, for the Edain. The best visual representation that I've sort of seen in these three kingdoms, and sort of the extent of the original Kingdom of Arnor, is the map on page 55 of the first edition of Fonstad's Atlas.
Yes, that really is a good illustration of all three of the sort of subsidiary kingdoms or successor kingdoms. And as such, you can see the large picture of what Arnor originally was. And we'll talk a little bit more about Arnor after the break. Now, soon we're going to get back to the arrival of evil in Arnor. I don't know what they ordered, but UPS is here and they're delivering a box of evil. Hello, is this your evil? Apparently so. So evil arrives in Arnor. But before we do, we want to remind you there's a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony podcast, thankfully, than just us.
And none of it is evil. The Prancing Pony podcast has an amazing, lawful, good listening community.
Or at least chaotic good. I mean, nobody in the evil realm. Yeah.
Definitely on the good side. But they are always coming up with great questions and discussion across all of our social media spaces. You can check out our common room on Facebook, our dedicated subreddit, Twitter, and more.
Now on Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony podcast. Follow the page, yes, but you're going to want to join the group to get in some great discussions.
Or if you prefer Reddit, you can find us there at r/PrancingPonyPod. On Twitter and Instagram, we are simply at PrancingPonyPod.
And if you want daily Tolkien content, please consider checking out Today's Tolkien Times on YouTube and all your favorite podcast apps. It's a short format daily show I've been working on now for a year and a half. It's everything from Mailbag Mondays to Word Nerd Wednesdays and Silmarillion Saturdays. Be sure to check it out at youtube.com/@TolkienTimes and follow @TolkienTimes on all your social media. Dawn, evil's going to come to Arnor. Can you read about it for us?
I think I can, Alan, in my evil voice.
Oh, yes. You must do the evil voice.
It was the beginning of the reign of Malvegiel of Arthedain that evil came to Arnor.
I can't do the evil voice.
Yeah, sorry,
right.
Too much. We can't keep going. It was the beginning of the reign of Malvegiel of Arthedain that evil came to Arnor. For at that time, the realm of Angmar arose in the north, beyond the Etten Moors. Its lands lay on both sides of the mountains, and there were gathered many evil men and orcs and other fell creatures. The lord of that land was known as the Witch King, but it was not known until later that he was indeed the chief of the Ringwraiths, who came north with the purpose of destroying the Dunedain in Arnor, seeing hope in their disunion, while Gondor was strong. In the days of Argeleb, son of Malvegiel, since no descendant of Isildur remained in the other kingdoms, the kings of Arthedain again claimed the lordship of all Arnor. The claim was resisted by Rhudaur. There the Dunedain were few, and power had been seized by an evil lord of the Hillmen, who was in secret league with Angmar. Argeleb therefore fortified the Weather Hills, but he was slain in battle with Rhudaur and Angmar. Arveleg, son of Argeleb, with the help of Cardolan and Lindon, drove back his enemies from the hills, and for many years Arthedain and Cardolan held in force a frontier along the Weather Hills, the Great Road, and the Lower Horwell. It is said that at this time Rivendell was besieged. A great host came out of Angmar in 1409, and crossing the river, entered Cardolan and surrounded Weathertop. The Dunedain were defeated, and Arveleg was slain. The Tower of Amon-Sul was burned and razed, but the Palantir was saved and carried back in retreat to Fornost. Rhudaur was occupied by evil men subject to Angmar, and the Dunedain that remained there were slain or fled west. Cardolan was ravaged. Arafor, son of Arveleg, was not yet full grown, but he was valiant, and with aid from Círdan he repelled the enemy from Fornost and the North Downs. A remnant of the faithful among the Dunedain of Cardolan also held out in Tirn Gorthad, the Barrow-downs, or took refuge in the forest behind. It is said that Angmar was, for a time, subdued by the elven folk coming from Lindon, and from Rivendell, for Elrond brought help over the mountains out of Lorien.
Yay, Elrond. All right.
Woohoo!
The text says that evil came to Arnor in the time of the reign of Malvegiel. Now, he was the sixth ruler of Arthedain after that three-way split in Third Age 861. His reign began a little more than 400 years after that split in Third Age 1272. This incident, evil coming to Arnor, in the text, happened around the year Third Age 1300.
Yeah, now, what incident is that? Oh, just the arising of the kingdom of Angmar, led by some guy calling himself the, Witch King, was it?
Witch King? The Witch King.
Witch King.
Who's on first? Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love this bracketed statement here, by the way, that says in essence, hey, we didn't know that this Witch King fella here was the Lord of the Nazgul. We also didn't know that he came up here with the goal of wiping out the Dunedain because we're just low-hanging fruit up here in the north, thanks to our little petty squabbles leading Arnor to be split up.
Yeah, another example of how this division in Middle-earth creates weakness and unity creates strength. This is a huge theme of Tolkien. This is just like we're stronger together, the literal power of friendship, but in this case it's politics. And
same thing happens even in the South when you end up with the Civil War and Castamere, as we'll end up talking about, I think, next week. We see that's when they become more vulnerable to attacks from the Wainwriters and things along those lines. It's always better to be united, to face that enemy as one. And here, Arnor in Three Little Kingdoms, the Witch King's like, well, Gondor's strong, Arnor not so much. Let's go get the easy win.
I always liken it to a bag of tea. If you take all of the individual leaves and you put them in one by one, they're sort of floating around, not really doing much. But if you put the tea in the bag and they're all together, they all start seeping, and you leave them all together long enough, they form a much stronger cup of tea.
Okay.
So
tea,
metaphor might need a little
Arnor,
bit more, but
okay. All right.
Kind of the same thing-ish.
So Angmar, by the way, since we've talked about the geography, all these other areas, we need to kind of provide a little more description about Angmar here as well. The text says both sides of the mountains. It's referring here to the Misty Mountains. Angmar ran from Conor Doom at the very western end of the Ered Mithrin, those are the Grey Mountains, all the way past Mount Gundabad, which is sort of at the junction of the Ered Mithrin and the Misty Mountains, and then east to above the sources of the Anduin. So it's sort of an east-west range through the mountains, both on the west side of the Misty Mountains and primarily on the west, but also on the east side.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this wasn't just a bunch of orcs in a mountain. There were also evil men, other fell creatures, whatever that means, Tolkien. I'm sure he's got an imagination like that.
Oh, he does.
There were that were also under the rule of the Witch King.
That's right. So now that we've talked about Angmar briefly, let's go back to Arthedain. All of this began quietly during the reign of Malvagil, but after he died in 1349, it was his son Argeleb I that became the king of Arthedain, but his reign lasted only 7 years.
Fairly short-lived reign, all things considered. He claimed lordship over the lands of Arnor, basically trying to reunify the three realms into a kingdom one more time, since there was no more descendants of Isildur remaining in Cardolan or Rhudaur.
Right.
Now, Rhudaur, if you look at a map, was clearly the realm most threatened by Angmar, just because of its location. Rhudaur opposed this, having been taken over by who the text says was an evil lord of the Hillmen in secret league with Angmar.
That's right. Now, Argeleb strengthens his border with Rhudaur, the Weather Hills, but is killed in battle against them. Now, on another note, I want to talk about this. We know nothing about these Hillmen beyond the fact that they're men and at some point lived near or in Rhudaur. That's literally all we know. We do get a clue or two in Peoples of Middle-earth. In the Heirs of Isildur, we read in the entry for Arveleg that in Rhudaur, an evil folk, workers of sorcery, subjects of Angmar, slay the remnants of the Dunedain and build dark forts in the hills.
And in the Tale of Years of the Third Age, which is drafts of the Tale of Years, we read something fairly similar. But in Rhudaur, for long there dwelt an evil people out of the north, much given to sorcery. In a note to the section of Dwarves and Men, we are told when hobbits entered Eriador, it says shortly after Third Age year 100, men were still numerous there, both Númenorians and other men related to the Etani, beside remnants of men of evil kinds, hostile to the king. So maybe that's who's there, just sort of the remnants of these evil humans.
Maybe. So with Argeleb dead, his son Arveleg, who began his rule then in Third Age 1356, allies himself with Cardolan and the Elves of Lindon, and that's a big deal. That enables him to drive Angmar back. Remember, we talked about being stronger together. This is a great example of that. Now, he ends up holding a frontier along the border with Rhudaur. So that's the Weather Hills north-south, and then east-west along the road to where it met with Cardolan's border with Rhudaur, the Horwell, and then that went south to where it met with the Loudwater to form the Grey Flood. So that's the frontier of Cardolan and Arthedain against Rhudaur at that point.
Yeah, and so we have this sort of long-standing, more than 50 years go by, this tension. It's now Third Age 1409, when a large army comes out of Angmar and just absolutely wrecks the place. They come through Cardolan over the river, so that would be the Horwell. They work their way west and a little bit more north to surround Weathertop.
That's right. Now the Dunedain are beaten. Arveleg himself is killed. The Tower of Amon Sul is destroyed. But fortunately, the Palantir in it was carried away in time and taken back to Fornost, which was at the time the capital of Arthedain.
We're reminded here that Rhudaur is now fully evil. Any remaining Dunedain have left. The place is now occupied by evil men subject to Angmar. And that's when we get to an underrated hero of that day, Arafor, the new king of Arthedain after the death of his father, Arveleg.
That's right. Now, Arafor is just a kid. He's 18 years old when he becomes king, but the text describes him as valiant, and we see him being exactly that. Now, Círdan, the most amazing elf still remaining in the Third Age, I'm going to keep banging that drum. Sorry, Galadriel. Círdan, not surprisingly, helps young Arafor out, and together they are able to drive these evil men from the capital of Arthedain, that's Fornost, and from the surrounding region of the North Downs.
I respect you for really liking Círdan, but I just got to say, if you don't really have too many written lines, all things considered.
That's fair. Yeah.
It's a tough pull, but I respect the hustle.
I just, when you know all the things that he did and all the things he gave up, and you see how much he wanted to go to Valinor, and yet he stayed and did what the Valar told him to do. I mean, the guy just is amazing. And then he comes to everybody's rescue. Everybody.
Yeah.
Círdan saves the day is like the theme of half a dozen moments in the Second and Third Ages. Yeah.
He's kind of awesome.
He pretty much is, yeah.
We also get a mention of where the last of the Dúnedain from Cardolan are hanging around. This is Tirn Gorthad, which is the Barrow-downs, or in what the text says is the forest behind. So that would be the old forest for those of you that are keeping track at home.
Now, I'm trying to remember if I talked about this on this show or on Rings of Power Wrap-Up or the TTT. I can't always remember and keep it all straight. I think it was on Rings of Power Wrap-Up when they were in the Barrow-downs. I want to talk about the pronunciation of Tirn Gorthad real quick. That Y in Sindarin is actually always a vowel. So, it's never a consonant like it can be in Quenya. And it actually isn't pronounced like the E that we're pronouncing it as, not in Sindarin proper. Now, that is the Gondorian pronunciation, so I'm going to stick with it because Tirn Gorthad sounds right to me, and I'm more Gondorian than I am Sindarin. But the Y in Sindarin, Tolkien actually makes this very clear, is pronounced like the German U with the umlaut. So you make an U shape with your lips, so U, but then you say E. So you make the shape with your lips and then go U, right? So Tirn. Yes, I can't even do it because it's so hard to go from a consonant to that sound and then come back out to a rolled R, but more like a Tirn Gorthad rather than Tirn Gorthad.
Our mouths kind of look like fish right now as we attempt to.
I remember not being able to make that sound very well when I took 3 years of high school German and a year or two of college German. I still couldn't do it. It's sort of thing. Anyway, more on the Barrow-downs in the next section, so let's keep going. Angmar gets put down for a little bit. Now, we'll see it again in around 500 years, but that's all thanks to Círdan and to Elrond. Elves to the left of me, elves to the right. Here I am stuck in the middle with you, Don.
And thanks to this temporary suppression of evil, being stuck in the middle in the part we didn't read, we learned that the Stores were living in the angle, that is the triangle of land with the Horwell on the west, Loudwater in the east, and the Troll Shawls in the north. They peace out of here.
Yeah.
The text says they fled west and south, thanks to Angmar, and a change in the weather in that part of Eriador.
That's right. Now, most of those Stores went west and south, but a few went back over the Misty Mountains, the text tells us, and lived next to the Gladden. Now, that's the river that runs east from the Misty Mountains down to the Anduin, passing through the Gladden fields. Clearly a direct reference to Smeagol and the kin that he was descended from.
This is a nice little nod to the fact that there are lots of hobbits just sort of strolling around and definitely not in any danger whatsoever.
That's right.
All right, Alan, I think we've got our next portion of the reading. You ready to go?
All right. In the days of Argeleb II, the plague came into Eriador from the southeast, and most of the people of Cardolan perished, especially in Minhiriath. The hobbits and all other peoples suffered greatly, but the plague lessened as it passed northwards, and the northern parts of Arthedain were little affected. It was at this time that an end came of the Dúnedain of Cardolan, and evil spirits out of Angmar and Rhudaur entered into the deserted mounds and dwelt there. It is said that the mounds of Tirn Gorthad, as the Barrow-downs were called of old, are very ancient, and that many were built in the days of the old world of the First Age by the forefathers of the Edain, before they crossed the Blue Mountains into Beleriand, of which Lindon is all that now remains. Those hills were therefore revered by the Dúnedain after their return, and there many of their lords and kings were buried. Some say that the mound in which the ring-bearer was imprisoned had been the grave of the last prince of Cardolan, who fell in the War of 1409. In 1974, the power of Angmar rose again, and the Witch King came down upon Arthedain before winter was ended. He captured Fornost and drove most of the remaining Dúnedain over the Lune, Among them were the sons of the king. But King Arvedui held out upon the North Downs until the last, and then fled north with some of his guard, and they escaped by the swiftness of their horses. For a while, Arvedui hid in the tunnels of the old dwarf mines near the far end of the mountains, but he was driven at last by hunger to seek the help of the Lossoth, the snowmen of Foreshell. Some of these he found in camp by the seashore, but they did not help the king willingly, for he had nothing to offer them, save a few jewels, which they did not value, and they were afraid of the Witch King, who they said could make frost or thaw at his will. But partly out of pity for the gaunt king and his men, and partly out of fear of their weapons, they gave them a little food and built for them snow huts. There Arvedui was forced to wait, hoping for help from the south, for his horses had perished. When Círdan heard from Arnor, son of Arvedui, of the king's flight to the north, he at once sent a ship to Foreshell to seek for him. The ship came there at last after many days because of contrary winds, and the mariners saw from afar the little fire of driftwood which the lost men contrived to keep alight. But the winter was long in loosing its grip that year, and though it was then March, the ice was only beginning to break and lay far out from the shore.
Before Angmar rises again, spoilers, it does.
Yeah, shocker.
The plague does a little softening up first. The text here doesn't tell us a year. It just mentions in the days of Argeleb II, but his reign was from 1589 to 1670. We do know, though, that the Great Plague that devastated Gondor hit there in 1636, so it was likely the same year or the year after.
Right. Now, the plague wiped out most of Cardolan, especially those living in Minhiriath. That's the southern portion of Cardolan. It's the part that's between the rivers Brandywine and Greyflood that sort of runs towards the sea. And in fact, by the way, that's what Minhiriath means, between the rivers in Sindarin, from min, meaning between, and the lenited form hir, from sir, river, and the class plural ending ath.
You are just working in all of these word nerdery things without even trying. I love it.
Gave some of it to you here. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because we've got another fun fact. In a letter in 1969 that Tolkien wrote, referenced in A Nature of Middle-earth, which was edited by Karl Hofstadter, this is chapter 22, The Rivers and Beacon Hills of Gondor. He was explaining that Edenwyth was a region between the realm of Gondor and the slowly receding realm of Arnor. It originally included Minhiriath, Mesopotamia.
Now, why the reference, Tolkien, to Mesopotamia? Well, because the name Mesopotamia carries the literal meaning between rivers, in this case, the Tigris and Euphrates. But it literally is the same thing linguistically as Minhiriath.
It hit everyone else, but the impact of the plague lessened as it moved north. So the northern parts of Arthedain, think like Lake Evendim and north, was apparently little affected by this.
Right. But this was also the time that something else happened. Evil spirits entered into the Barrow-downs and took up residence in the old graves.
And they didn't just arrive on their own. The text here doesn't say, but if we go to Unfinished Tales, The Hunt for the Ring, we read that the Witch King had known something of the country long ago, and his wars with the Dunedain, and especially of Tir Ngorthad of Cardolan, now the Barrow-downs, whose evil wights had been sent there by himself.
And then, of course, we get the Sindarin name, Tir Ngorthad, and that's what we were talking about earlier, the pronunciation of that. If you watched Rings of Power, you might have heard it pronounced Tir Ngorthad, and that is correct. Like I said, the Y in Sindarin is a vowel, and it's pronounced like the German umlauted U. But in Gondor, it is pronounced E, so Tir Ngorthad is also correct. The phrase itself is a compound of the plural Tirn, from the singular torn, meaning burial mound, and Gorthad, meaning wraith or spirit of the dead. And that is also from Parma El de Labaron 17, Words and Phrases in The Lord of the Rings, in case you're wondering. It's a great resource.
The Downs themselves have been around for ages. They are just rolling hills, but the Barrows have been around a long time as well. The old world of the First Age before men crossed the Blue Mountains into Beleriand.
That is a long time ago, folks. I mean, that's sometime between Years of the Sun 1, when men first arose, and Year of the Sun 310, when men were first encountered in Beleriand by Finrod. That's exceedingly long time.
It's a long time. This explains why they were held basically in reverence by the Dunedain and why they buried their lords and kings there.
That's right, including the last prince of Cardolan, whose memories Merry experienced in the Barrow. Of course, I remember, he said. The men of Carndum came on us at night and we were worsted. Ah, the spear in my heart! He clutched at his breast. No, he said, opening his eyes. What am I saying? I have been dreaming. That was quite a moment in the text, I got to say. That was, for him to be sort of, to experience that directly, firsthand, to sort of feel like he is the Prince of Cardolan being slain right there. That's some power. Yeah.
Some very powerful evil magic, too, to be able to affect people all those years later. So remember when I said that the power of Angmar would rise again, Alan?
Yeah, I do remember that.
That is what's happening now.
Oh, no. I am surprised. I am utterly shocked.
Get ready, because it gets worse. The plague comes around in 1636, so it's another 300 years after that. The Witch King came down again out of Angmar. He took Arthedain's capital of Fornos and then forced most of the remaining men across the Lune, that is out of Arthedain and into Elvish country.
Right. Now, 2 of those men that fled into Elvish country are the sons of King Arvedui. We only know the name of one of them, as we find out later, and it's the eldest son, Aronarth.
Yeah, we should add that even though this was a very sudden attack, it's not entirely unexpected. As we'll read in 2 weeks, Arvedui had been in touch with Gondor. First, when he claimed the crown of Gondor after the death of Andaher and his sons. His claim, though, was rejected, and we'll get to that in 2 weeks. But after that, Eärnil, who had become the king of Gondor, sent messages basically promising to aid Arvedui if needed.
Right. And that's when we read, it was, however, long before Eärnil felt himself sufficiently secure to do as he promised. King Arafant, Arvedui's father, continued with dwindling strength to hold off the assaults of Angmar, and Arvedui, when he succeeded, did likewise. But at last, in the autumn of 1973, messages came to Gondor that Arthedain was in great straits, and that the Witch King was preparing a last stroke against it. Then Eärnil sent his son Eärnor north with a fleet as swiftly as he could, and with as great strength as he could spare. Too late. Before Eärnor reached the havens of Lindon, the Witch King had conquered Arthedain. And by the way, it's also in a couple of weeks when we'll do a breakdown on Arvedui's name. This is all connected, I promise.
This is just Tolkien sort of working his magic as things become connected and interweaved. And this is part of the reason why I love Tolkien so much.
I mean, what's wild is here we are talking about the split of Arnor into these kingdoms, and the last of those kingdoms, Arthedain, surviving but almost being gone. And one of the reasons that it doesn't survive is because Arvedui, who had the legitimate claim to the throne, had his claim rejected in the south. It's wild. It's wild.
It really is. Yeah. It feels like just a giant miscommunication or being too stubborn to actually see the danger right here. Because Arvedui basically holds out as best as he can in the North Downs, then flees to the north. He's first hiding in some dwarven mining tunnels before eventually, driven by, of all things, hunger, tries to get some help from Lossoth.
Now, the footnote to this tells us that the Lossoth were a strange, unfriendly people, remnant of the Forodwaith, men of far-off days, accustomed to the bitter colds of the realm of Morgoth. Indeed, those colds linger still in that region, though they lie hardly more than 100 leagues north of the Shire. The Lossoth house in the snow, and it is said that they can run on the ice with bones on their feet and have carts without wheels.
Yeah, the name Lossoth is Sindarin and contains the element of loss, snow, as in Fanuilos, snow white, one of the names of Varda, and Uilos, which is ever white, one of the names the elves give the flower Cymbalmuna.
Right. But it also contains the element Hoth, not related to the ice planet Hoth, despite the similar cold temperatures and snow, though now I want to see the Lossoth running around on tauntauns. And Arvedui cutting one open to get himself wrapped up in the guts of it to keep himself warm.
Yeah, I don't know if Tolkien would probably approve of that.
No.
We might need to pump the brakes again on that one. It's a little graphic, Alan.
Can I tell you, speaking of graphic, and nobody's ever going to eat a funnel cake again. My son, when he was 6, we ordered a funnel cake at Disneyland. He goes, look, tauntaun guts.
Oh my. No, thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
It was the shape, the little curvy. Then I'm like, oh man, dude, no, I don't want this. I mean, but yes, I do. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I still do. Sorry, that didn't change anything.
No, absolutely. Now I'm craving one. So it does contain the element Hoth. And like I said, sorry, all the Empire Strikes Back jokes aside, Hoth is Sindarin for host or horde. But here's the thing. It's almost always in a bad or evil or negative sense, right? You think of Balcoth, the people of the Easterlings that were related to the Wainriders. Or the most obvious word, the Sindarin word for orcs, Glamhoth. That's the din or yelling horde. We even get Gaurhoth, which is the plural for werewolves. So I don't think, mostly because they also didn't speak Sindarin, that this was their own name for themselves. This is very much an outsider name for them. And honestly, it's a bit derogatory, right? The Lossoth. I mean, you can think of, what about the rim element, like Rohirrim or the Galadhrim? I mean, we could have called them the Lothrim, and they'd be the snow people. But we've called them the Lossoth. And that Hoth element, host or horde, definitely has a negative connotation. It's very interesting, but we're never told what they call themselves. It's very interesting. I want to know more about them.
This definitely seems to be the case of history and names being given by the winners or the people in power, for sure.
That's a fair point. Now, I will say, totally not canonically speaking, but Lotro, Lord of the Rings Online, which I really do enjoy as sort of an extension of canon, if you will. They model a lot of the language of the Lossoth and their culture after the Finnish and Sami people. And there they call themselves the Lumivaki. I don't know what they call themselves in the real world, in Tolkien's Middle-earth, but I sort of like to think of them as the Lumivaki.
The way Tolkien's lore works, there's layers on layers. It feels like a group project at this point.
Yeah, it kind of does, yeah.
One person did all of the work.
Especially on these borders, the things where we don't get anything on them. There's nothing else about them. The Hillmen, there's nothing about the Hillmen. I want to know more about them too, right?
I bet you they lived in hills.
I bet you they did. And we do know that they were into sorcery and they came from the north. That's all we know. And maybe they used to be related to the Lossoth, and there's a split between them.
Oh, so another divided kingdom? We've had one divided kingdom, yes. What about second divided kingdom?
We do know that the Lossoth were a remnant of the Barrow-downs, were accustomed to the bitter colds of the realm of Morgoth. So maybe. Anyway, continue.
So whatever they called themselves and however unfriendly they might have been, they did show him pity and gave them food and shelter. He didn't have anything that they wanted to trade for, but they were a bit afraid of the weapons too. So
yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah. So he waited there, and with no choice, basically, since his horses were all dead.
Yeah. I mean, where are you going to go? You got to wait here for help. So now back to the best third age elf. I will brook no dissent. Círdan sends a ship to look for him, right? Círdan to the rescue, sends a ship when he hears word that he's headed north.
Yeah, this is something that Alan and I are going to fight about. But it does take a long time for the ships to get there, so maybe it wasn't that good of an elf. But eventually, they do spot just a little fire that Arvedui and his men have made.
I don't see Galadriel sending a ship.
Sorry, she does everything by wireless Bluetooth connections.
Yeah.
Sorry. But because it is still March and that it's been a cold winter, the ice went pretty far out from the shore, meaning the boat could not approach closely.
Yeah. The Lossoth, and they were going to check with Punxsutawney Phil to see when the winter was going to end. I can see it now.
Your European viewers listening to this right now are just
like, who? What?
Have we explained Punxsutawney Phil?
I've never explained Punxsutawney Phil. Let's give folks the 30-second TLDR version.
A large squirrel predicting the weather. Just watch the movie Groundhog Day. You'll get everything you need from that.
All right. Well, we'll be right back, folks. Now, folks, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the PPP by joining the Fellowship of the Podcast. It's what gives me the ability to work on making this show better every year, despite co-hosts like Don. I'm just kidding.
Wow. Wow. No, I respect the joke. Well done. It's perfect. I mean...
No, when you join, folks, and you really should, you get the best Discord community around. I know Don can testify to that. It includes live episode recordings and hangouts every month. You also get episode postscripts, which are a lot of fun. You can get ad-free episodes, free merch, and more.
You can also become part of our Questions After Nightfall episodes, which I'm much better at than Alan. Sorry, I had to defend myself.
No, it's true. I do not deny.
I'm a millennial. I have more Discord knowledge and I speak the lingo. But anyway, you can join us there, or you can even join us as a guest in the North Wing. So please go to patreon.com/DonMarshall72. Just kidding. Prancing Pony. See what I did there? You see what I did there?
I do.
Patreon.com/PrancingPonyPod to show your support and join the Fellowship of the Podcast.
Now, of course, you can always help us out by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts as well, or a rating on Spotify. And please recommend us to your friends. In the meantime, Don, would you please continue reading about Arvedui, Last King?
Get ready, Rudolph. We've got some snow-related things coming in. When the snowmen saw the ship, they were amazed and afraid, for they had seen no such ship on the sea within their memories. But they had become now more friendly, and they drew the king and those that survived of his company out over the ice in their sliding carts, as far as they dared. In this way, a boat from the ship was able to reach them. But the snowmen were uneasy, for they said that they smelled danger in the wind. And the chief of the Lossoth said to Arvedui, "Do not mount on this sea monster. If they have them, let the seamen bring us food and other things that we need, and you may stay here till the Witch King goes home. For in summer his power wanes, but now his breath is deadly, and his cold arm is long." But Arvedui did not take his counsel. He thanked him, and at parting gave him his ring, saying, "This is a thing of worth beyond your reckoning. For its ancientry alone, it has no power, save the esteem in which those hold it who love my house. It will not help you, but if ever you are in need, my kin will ransom it with great stores of all that you desire." Yet the counsel of the Lossoth was good, by chance or by foresight, for the ship had not reached the open sea when a great storm of wind arose, and came with blinding snow out of the north. And it drove the ship back upon the ice, and piled ice up against it. Even the mariners of Círdan were helpless. And in the night the ice crushed the hull, and the ship foundered. So perished Arvedui, last king. And with him the Palantiri were buried in the sea. It was long afterwards that news of the shipwreck of Foroshel. It was long afterwards that the news of the shipwreck of Foroshel was learned from the snowmen. The Shire folk survived, though war swept over them and most of them fled into hiding. To the help of the king, they sent some archers who never returned, and others went also to the battles in which Angmar was overthrown, of which more is said in the annals of the south. Afterwards, in the peace that followed, the Shire folk ruled themselves and prospered. They chose a thane to take the place of the king, and were content, though for a long time many still looked for the return of the king.
It's right there on the shelf next to the two towers.
Yeah.
So we're reminded once again that this was written by the hobbits. You know, we didn't mention this in the very first reading, but back when the very first paragraph, I read something about, for this reason they, talking about the dwarves, were accustomed to pass east along the Great Road as they'd done for long years before we came to the Shire. So here we have yet another reminder that this is written by the Hobbit survivors. And of course, it's also why they mentioned the little, platoon of archers that were sent, but we'll get to that.
Love those.
In the meantime, let's call them the Losrim. Right? At least that's people like the Rohirrim. The Losrim had never seen a ship like I guess that would be the Lothrim then. I think that would actually lenite to
change the pronunciation
from Los, the Lothrim. I think, if I remember. I may be wrong, but let's call them that for fun, for kicks and giggles. They had never seen a ship like the one Círdan sent, and that makes a lot of sense. Not only are they in a very cold region, one very inhospitable for maritime travel, as we see, also really, really, really remote.
Yeah, and, no doubt they had small canoes, maybe like some fishing vessels, but this was beyond their comprehension, and it led to something that Tolkien uses a lot, both amazement and fear. And so in overcoming their fear, they have become now more friendly. So they help by bringing the king, his remaining men, out onto the boats via sled where the ship's boat could reach them.
That's very kind of them, but now they have some wisdom to offer. And yes, Arvedui, you should have listened. They smell danger, smells like teen spirit. And the chief, who's, clearly they're more than just friendly now because it's the chief himself who's giving this advice, right? So, the entire, the tribe has officially welcomed them. He's the one who tells Arvedui, do not get on this ship. And I love the way he phrases it, do not mount on this sea monster.
Yeah, I love that he calls it a sea monster too. That's so great. And
isn't that cool?
Yeah, he sees it in the wind, but instead have them give you food, and you should basically stay until summer, until the Witch King is less powerful. Also, recall in the last section, we read that they were afraid of the Witch King, who, they said, could make frost or thaw at his will. So if they believed that he could do this, then of course they could see summer as a time of the waning of his power.
Right. But here's the question. Could the Witch King actually do this? Now, I actually don't see why not. Right? We're told twice that he was a sorcerer even before he was given one of the 9 by Sauron. Back in the Council of Elrond, Gandalf's telling about his conversation with Radagast, who's the one who brought him the news that the 9 are seeking for the Shire. Gandalf explains, "For even the wise might fear to withstand the 9 when they are gathered together under their fell chieftain. A great king and sorcerer he was of old, and now he wields a deadly fear.
Yeah, this is definitely, I'm getting some like warlock intimidation vibes where there's some sort of magical power, but it's mostly a brain sort of thing. Because remember, later in the Siege of Gondor, Gandalf is debating Denethor and saying, "Yet now under the Lord of Barrow-downs, the most fell of all his captains is already master of your outer walls, king of Angmar long ago, sorcerer, ringwraith, lord of the Nazgul, a spear of terror in the hand of Sauron, shadow of despair." So definitely a lot there about powers and abilities that are sort of, to me, read as a much more mental thing, striking fear into the hearts of things, making you feel cold, making you feel that terror, that fear, that despair.
Well, and of course, he does have the ring by now. He's been, wielding one of the nine for some time now. Combine that with the fact that he was a powerful king and sorcerer even before, it doesn't shock me that he'd have the ability maybe to enhance winter. Like, I think summer probably is a period of his waning strength in the sense that, he'd have to exert a lot more energy, a lot more power, a lot more force in order to make something cold. Whereas in the winter, he doesn't have to do as much to make it a little colder or to keep the cold from thawing early, right? So
I feel like you might want to invest in a thermos, maybe. Something.
Could we get a sponsorship maybe to talk about that? We could,
No joke. I have had a thermos company reach out to me.
Have you?
Let me see what we can do.
There you go. Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah. All right. So did Arvedui listen? No, of course not. Why would he do that?
Nobody ever listens.
No. Instead, he gives him the most valuable heirloom. Not anything, practical or useful like a thermos, but especially here in Foreshell, but of immense and immeasurable worth to the Dunedain.
That's right. And I want to do a quick sidebar here on this. If it's not clear what ring he's talking about, this is the Ring of Barahir. And I don't think we've ever done a sidebar on just how well-traveled, shall we say, this ring is. It was made in Valinor by the Noldor in the years of the trees, so it is ancient. It belonged to Finrod Felagund, who took it with him into exile and wore it in Nargothrond. That means it's at least 6,000 years old at the time Arvedui gives it to the chief of the snowmen, which makes it actually a little over 7,000, at least 7,100 years old by the time of the War of the Ring, when Aragorn is wearing it at his coronation.
When Barahir saved his life at the Dagor Bragollach, Finrod gave the ring to him as a token of friendship between Finrod and the House of Barahir. Barahir wore it for the rest of his life, and then when he died, his hand was still wearing the ring. Read the Tale of Beren and Luthien, it'll explain a lot more. The hand had been taken by an orc leader, and then Beren, his son, avenged his father and retrieved the hand, taking the ring and burying the hand with his father.
Yeah. So he didn't bury the ring, he kept the ring. And that's a good thing, because later on, he would show the ring to Thingol as sort of an indication of his standing, of his friendship with the elves. And then he used it again, holding it up high above his head to keep him safe when entering Finrod's realm. That is when Finrod then chose to honor his oath and ended up, long story short, giving his life to save Beren. And eventually, through Dior, the son of Beren and Luthien, his daughter Elwing, and then her son Elros, the Ring of Barahir made it to Númenor.
It was an heirloom of the kings until Tar Elendil gave it not to his son, Tarmin Eldor, but to his daughter, Silmarion, who was not able to succeed him.
That's right.
And then she gave it to her son, Valandil, who was the first lord of the Anduniae, and it stayed in that line of the lords of Anduniae all the way to Elendil, who took it with him when the faithful escaped the downfall in Númenor, like we talked about last week.
That's right. And it then went to each of the kings of Arnor, then the kings of Arthedain, until this moment in the text. Now later, it gets ransomed by the Rangers, and it ends up being kept at Rivendell, where it remains until Elrond gives it to Aragorn in a little more than 1,000 years from now, when he tells him his real name and his lineage. Now, Aragorn gave the ring to Arwen as a token of their betrothal, and that is the last we hear of it. I know I mentioned when he was wearing it at his, at his coronation. There's nothing that says that he did. He actually might not have. He gave it to her as a token of their betrothal. That literally is the last time it appears in the text. Presumably, she either took it with her to her grave at Caer Amroth, or, I like to think more likely, gave it to her son Eldarion, where it remained an heirloom of the reunited kingdom.
I really like that. Okay, the brief sidebar. Page and a half of notes is done. We get back into the text and why Arvedui definitely should have listened to the Lossoth. We're not told whether it was happenstance or whether their foresight was accurate, but the weather turned bad as soon as they tried to head out.
That's right. Before the ship could even exit the bay and reach the open ocean, a strong north wind comes, driving heavy snow, driving the ship back onto the ice and then piling ice on top of it. So we're talking like a freezing rain, the kind of, it's just the right temperature to turn the snow into ice. And now it's just crushing the ship.
Yeah, definitely feels like a heavy weight kind of snow.
Yes.
And no matter how good the ship is or how good Círdan and the mariners are, no one's surviving this. The hull breaks, the ship sinks, taking Arvedui and his men along with Círdan's mariners to their death.
Now, the text tells us that this is how Arvedui, last king, perished. And, well, that really makes me want to do some more nerdery. We're going to save that for 2 weeks from now when we also see Malbeth's prophecy about Arvedui.
Oh, good old Malbeth. It's also mentioned here that the Palantiri were lost as well. Those would be the Stones of Númenor and Amon Sul. The latter, the one that was taken from Amon Sul to Fornost before Amon Sul was captured and destroyed by the Witch King in 1409.
Right, we talked about that one earlier. Now, the Númenor stone would have been brought to Fornost whenever it was that the capital of Arnor relocated to Fornost. That was actually before the split, but we don't know precisely when the capital was moved. Now, with both of those Palantiri and Fornost, Arvedui took them with him when he fled at the Witch King's advance.
That leaves only the Stone of the Tower at Emen Baraid, the Tower Hills, that looks out over the Gulf of Lune. The footnote to this text tells us that, though we never knew it, it remained there until Círdan put it aboard Elrond's ship when he left.
Now, we're also told that it wouldn't have been useful in Middle-earth anyway. We read that it was unlike the others and not in accord with them. It looked only to the sea. Elendil set it there so that he could look back with straight sight and see Eressëa in the vanished west. But the bent seas below covered Númenor forever. And then we get the last statement about this incident, explaining that the news of this was learned from the snowmen of Foreshell much later. I have to say that probably happened around the time that the Ring of Barahir was ransomed from them.
Yeah, and finally, we get to the paragraph about our dear old hobbit friends of the Shire. They managed to survive this whole conflict, even though many of them basically had to hide.
Yeah.
This is also where we get the dubious claim that they sent a unit of archers to help out Arvedui. We read more in the prologue. To the last battle at Fornost with the Witch Lord of Angmar, they sent some bowmen to the aid of the king. Or so they maintained, though no tales of men record it. So they probably just didn't see them. But
where are the archers? Down here. Yeah, or they didn't make it. Or the archers are like, I'm not going back. Are you going back? Because I don't want to go die. What about you?
No.
Let's go farm someplace. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. So after that, since the hobbits didn't have a king anymore, they throve under self-rule with a thane to take that nominal leadership role, but many still looked for the return of the king, and I've got a dozen copies on my shelf. Just ask.
Thank you so much, Alan. I'll take 4. Eventually, even that passed into nothing more than saying, when the king comes back. So
that's right. When the king comes back is, when pigs fly, right? I mean, it took on that sort of proverbial never going to happen sort of moment, well, when the king comes back, we'll take care of that. That means it'll probably never get done. And it does remind me a bit of the stewards of Gondor and their oath to hold rod and rule in the name of the king until he shall return, and how that just became pro forma, just meaningless words after a while. There was no expectation that the king would ever come back.
Yeah, no, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Spoilers.
It does.
It does.
Dear reader.
It does. That's the whole book. In the last line that we did not read, we are told that the first Thane of the Shire was Bucca, and that he became Thane in 1979. That is 5 years after the fall of Arthedain.
That's right.
And with that, Alan, do we have one final section to read today?
We do. After Arvedui, the North Kingdom ended, for the Dunedain were now few, and all the peoples of Eriador diminished. Yet the line of the kings was continued by the chieftains of the Dunedain, of whom Aranarth, son of Arvedui, was the first. Arahail, his son, was fostered in Rivendell, and so were all the sons of the chieftains after him. And there also were kept the heirlooms of their house, the Ring of Barahir, the shards of Narsil, the Star of Elendil, and the Scepter of Númenor. When the kingdom ended, the Dunedain passed into the shadows and became a secret and wandering people, and their deeds and labors were seldom sung or recorded. Little now is remembered of them since Elrond departed. Although even before the watchful peace ended, evil things again began to attack Eriador or to invade it secretly. The chieftains, for the most part, lived out their long lives. Aragorn I, it is said, was slain by wolves, which ever after remained a peril in Eriador and are not yet ended. In the days of Arahad I, the orcs, who had, as later appeared, long been secretly occupying strongholds in the Misty Mountains, so as to bar all the passes into Eriador, suddenly revealed themselves. In 2509, Celebrian, wife of Elrond, was journeying to Lorien when she was waylaid in the Redhorn Pass, and her escort being scattered by the sudden assault of the orcs, she was seized and carried off. She was pursued and rescued by Elladan and Elrohir, but not before she had suffered torment and had received a poisoned wound. She was brought back to Imladris, and though healed in body by Elrond, lost all delight in Middle-earth, and the next year went to the Havens and passed over sea. And later, in the days of Araswyl, orcs, multiplying again in the Misty Mountains, began to ravage the lands, and the Dunedain and the sons of Elrond fought with them. It was at this time that a large band came so far west as to enter the Shire, and were driven off by Banderbus Took. There were 15 chieftains before the 16th and last was born, Aragorn II, who became again king of both Gondor and Arnor. Our king, we call him, and when he comes north to his house in a Númenor restored, and stays for a while by Lake Evendim, then everyone in the Shire is glad. But he does not enter this land, and binds himself by the law that he has made, that none of the big people shall pass its borders. But he rides often with many fair people to the Great Bridge, and there he welcomes his friends and any others who wish to see him. And some ride away with him and stay in his house as long as they have a mind. Thane Peregrine has been there many times, and so has Master Samwise the Mayor. His daughter, Eleanor the Fair, is one of the maids of Queen Evenstar. It was the pride and wonder of the northern line that, though their power departed and their people dwindled, through all the many generations the succession was unbroken from father to son. Also, though the length of lives of the Dunedain grew ever less in Middle-earth, after the ending of their kings, the waning was swifter in Gondor, and many of the chieftains of the north still lived to twice the age of men, and far beyond the days of even the oldest amongst us. Aragorn indeed lived to be 210 years old, longer than any of his line since King Arvagil. But in Aragorn Elessar, the dignity of the kings of old was renewed.
And with the death of Arvedui, the remnants of the kingdom of Arnor end. Remember, last king.
Kind of what it means, yep.
Yep. The Dunedain, these are the men of the West, the people that escaped the downfall of Númenor, are very few.
That's right. Now, we just read earlier that the Dunedain that remained in Rhudaur were slain or fled west in 1409. That was when those remaining in Cardolan held out in the Barrow-downs or Old Forest. A little over 200 years later, around 1636, when the plague hit, we read, at this time an end came of the Dunedain of Cardolan. So the ones in Arthedain were almost all that remained.
But not quite all of them died after all. The line was continued in the line of chieftains, starting with Aranarth, the son of Arvedui, and starting with his son Arahail. All of the chieftains were fostered in Rivendell by Elrond.
I love that.
Kind of love this part, yeah. This daddy Elrond taking care of his brother's great,
That's right.
great,
yeah.
Great.
To the 17th, 27th power or something, yeah.
The grandkids.
Uncle Elrond, good old Uncle Elrond watching his nephews. Also in Rivendell with those fostered chieftains, the heirlooms. Now, we've talked about the Ring of Barra here earlier, but let's chat a bit about these others. There's the Shards of Narsil. Now, in the Council of Elrond, the Lord of Rivendell is telling about when he was the Herald of Gil-galad and marched with his host. I was at the Battle of Dagorlad before the Black Gate of Mordor, where we had the mastery. For the spear of Gil-galad and the sword of Elendil, Aeglos and Narsil, none could withstand. I beheld the last combat on the slopes of Orodruin, where Gil-galad died and Elendil fell, and Narsil broke beneath him. But Sauron himself was overthrown, and Isildur cut the ring from his hand with the hilt shard of his father's sword and took it for his own.
Now later he mentions that it's really no surprise the news of the destiny of the One Ring was lost to Gondor. Right. After all, only 3 men survived the Gladden fields. And also, Elrond adds, one of these was Ohtar, the esquire of Isildur, who bore the shards of the sword of Elendil, and he brought them to Valandil, the heir of Isildur, who, being but a child, had remained here in Rivendell, but Narsil was broken, and its light extinguished, and it has not yet been been forged again.
Spoilers, it will be. Now, we also read, besides the Shards of Narsil, that the Star of Elendil is kept in Rivendell. Well, that is another name for the Elendilmere, and boy, is there a backstory there. And we're really still just going to kind of go over it fairly quickly. This was, of course, the second Elendilmere, so let's talk about the first one first. It's a star-shaped white gem set on a fillet of mithril. We're going to name somebody again that we've already mentioned. It dated back to the very early years of Númenor and belonged first to Silmarion, who we mentioned earlier as being a holder of the Ring of Barrow. She passed it, along with the other heirlooms of the house, down the line.
Yeah, and because the scepter was a symbol of royalty in Númenor, the same was true in Arnor, which meant they didn't wear a crown per se, but instead wore the Elendilmere. This original Elendilmere was being worn by Isildur when he died. Mm-hmm. In fact, though he at first was invisible because of the ring, the bright light of the Elendilmere is said to have blazed forth red and wrathful as a burning star.
That's right.
And since Elendilmere was lost with Isildur, the second version was made by Elrond smiths, and it became the royal symbol of the North Kingdom, along with the Scepter of Annúminas, which is next on our list.
That's right. Now, the Elendilmere stayed in this line. It was worn by Aragorn on the Battle of the Pelennor Fields and at his coronation. And think about it. This is the one made by Elrond smiths after Isildur's death, so it's already 3,000 years old. So it's already, a piece of incredible ancientry. But do you want to know what they found in Orthanc when Aragorn ordered its restoration? Let's read. At last, behind a hidden door that they could not have found or opened had not Elessar had the aid of Gimli the dwarf, a steel closet was revealed. Maybe it had been intended to receive the ring, but it was almost bare. In a casket on a high shelf, two things were laid. One was a small case of gold attached to a fine chain. It was empty and bore no letter or token, but beyond all doubt, it had once borne the ring about Isildur's neck. Next to it lay a treasure without price, long mourned as lost forever, the Elendilmere itself, the white star of elvish crystal upon a fillet of mithril that had descended from Silmarion to Elendil and had been taken by him as the token of royalty in the North Kingdom.
And for an even longer sidebar on the Elendilmere, you can go to episode 324 from last season, and that is where Alan and Sarah covered that part of the chapter, the steward and the king, and spent quite a bit of time on it, if I remember correctly.
Indeed. Now, the Scepter of Annúminas was, like the Scepter of Númenor, the symbol of royalty rather than a crown. Now, the Scepter of Númenor would have gone with Ar-Pharazôn and is still stuck in the Caves of the Forgotten. Spoilers, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit of spoilers. The Scepter of Annúminas is, according to the footnotes for this passage, the silver rod of the Lords of Andúnie, and is now perhaps the most ancient work of men's hands preserved in Middle-earth. It was already more than 5,000 years old when Elrond surrendered it to Aragorn.
My goodness, it's almost as old as the Ring of Barrow here.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive stuff. Actually, not really. I just realized it's like 7,000 years old is the Ring of Barrow here, but still pretty impressive for something made by men. Now, even with the chieftains raised in Rivendell and the retention of the heirlooms of their house, the Dunedain are said to have become a secret and wandering people. The Rangers, doing good, but nearly invisibly, not having their deeds sung. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a meta story. The narrator here is explaining that Elrond's passing into the West, little is remembered of them.
So in other words, Elrond is the only one who really can talk about these chieftains and talk about the Rangers and what they've done because their stories aren't sung, right? There's no other source of information. Elrond knew them, of course, because he'd fostered all of them in Rivendell. But now that he's gone, who's going to tell their story?
Who knows? Yeah. Who knows? Probably Frodo in the Red Book and Samwise Gamgee and all of these people.
Well, that's why we're reading the appendices so we can read their story. Yes.
That's why we're here. All right. Then we learned that typically they lived out their long lives. Remember, Númenorian blood and all that.
Right, exactly. So they mostly, they didn't die in battle all the time. I mean, some of them did, but for the most part, they lived out their lives. But in the middle of this paragraph about the chieftains and the Rangers, we get a glimpse of a story we don't really get details of anywhere else, and that's Celebrian's story, the wife of Elrond.
Yeah, orcs have been building up their numbers and building strongholds all over the Misty Mountains in order to block passage into Eriador from the east. The text tells us they suddenly revealed themselves, so that when Celebrian, the daughter of Celeborn and Galadriel, was on her way to visit her folks in Lorien, she was attacked.
That's right, so her escort was scattered and she was taken away by the orcs. Her sons, Elladan and Elrohir, pursued and did eventually rescue her, but not until after she'd been tortured and poisoned.
Yeah, and we get a brief mention of this in many meetings when Frodo sees Arwen, who'd just come back from Lorien while her brothers were away. But her brothers, Elladan and Elrohir, were out upon errantry, for they rode often far afield with the rangers of the north, forgetting never their mother's torment in the dens of orcs.
That's right. And even though she is brought back to Rivendell and physically healed, of course, because Elrond is skilled in that, she loses all delight in Middle-earth and ends up sailing back to Valinor the very next year.
Yeah, we also get reference to the orcs going so far west that they entered the Shire, having been driven off by Ben Dobrus Took while he was off inventing golf.
Golfimble. I love that. How Tolkien sort of makes a little philological joke about the name of a sport that, it's cute.
Love it.
And then, of course, the text brings us to Aragorn, right? The 16th chieftain in this line. I mean, you think about what this line has been through. This was the line that you would trace all the way back to to Elros. Yes, it split off the kings of Númenor when Silmarion could not inherit the throne and instead begin the line of the lords of Andúnië. That line went all the way down through Elendil, who escapes, comes to Middle-earth. You have Isildur. You have 8 high kings of Arnor, but then Arnor is split and you have the kings of Arthedain. Then Arthedain is destroyed, and now you have the chieftains of the Dúnedain, and the 16th chieftain is Aragorn, who eventually becomes king of the reunited realms of Gondor and Arnor, which really were only together kingdoms for, a year of the Third Age before Isildur went to the north and left the rule of Gondor to his nephew in the south, to the son of Anarion. Yeah. So, big stuff here. The mention of a restored Numenor, where he and Arwen stay frequently, comes up. We talked about that a little bit in the epilogue. And speaking of also things we talked about in the epilogue, the reminder that Aragorn abides by his own law. He follows his own rule on this. Big people are not to enter the Shire.
Love that. And as we discussed in the 2 episodes on the epilogue, how some of the hobbits have been up to that restored Anúmenor to stay with King Elessar. This is Pippin, who is Thane at this point, as well as Sam, the mayor, and his daughter Eleanor.
That's right. And then we get a part here that isn't in quotes. It's very interesting because, at the beginning of the appendices, we're told that, larger quotes are from these annals. And then there's these bits that are clearly by whoever's assembling this in the Red Book of Westmarch. So this is the compiler of the annals and not a quote from one of the original sources. We get the summation that the Northern line takes pride in the fact that the line of Isildur was maintained unbroken for so many generations. That is pretty amazing.
Definitely seems to be a talking point. Yeah. And while their lives were shorter than the lives of the Númenóreans originally, the chieftains were of the line of Isildur, and they did have longer lives, twice the age of men.
That's right. Twice the age of men. And interestingly, and I don't think I noticed this until I was reading it out loud, the commenter obviously is a hobbit because he says, lived to twice the age of men and far beyond the days of even the oldest among us. So clearly, the us is the hobbits and not the men. I just thought it was very interesting. Again, a little sort of digression into the authorship of these.
I like it.
These pieces.
I like it.
And I love how Tolkien maintains that fiction all the way through. It's fantastic. Yeah. And then, of course, Aragorn specifically is mentioned as having lived for 210 years, but that was long even for a chieftain or even a king of Arthedain. But the reason for that is simple. The dignity of the kings of old was renewed in him.
See?
Yeah. Yeah.
All you had to do was have some dignity, Pharazôn. That's all.
That's all.
That's all. You'd live longer. Just be
dignified. Yeah, be dignified. That's right. In Barlow and Butterbur, the dignity of the barkeeps of old was renewed. Dawn? What does Barlow have for us tonight?
Yes, we've got a question from Haley H. from Texas.
Okay.
She asks, if Arnor had stayed a united kingdom, could they potentially pose a threat to Sauron and Angmar? And what do you believe made them split apart?
Wow. Okay.
Lots to think about there.
Lots to think about. Well, we sort of almost dove into it in the discussion, like what did cause them to split apart? I've got to imagine that the sons that weren't going to inherit the kingship, do I have speculation? Don, I struggle with this because I have a real hard time filling in the blanks. I mean, the only thing I can think of is just pure jealousy and the fact that really, because the capital of Arnor was at Fornost, that was where all the power was. So, which though to me that then doesn't explain why you'd want to split up the kingdom, because unless you're going to get Fornost, why bother, right? I'm thinking I'd rather be second in command of a big kingdom than first in command of a shell that doesn't have the Palantiri, that doesn't have the Ring of Barahir, that doesn't have the capital of Fornost. But somehow there was something going on, some sort of split between these sons. And it was enough that their father, I should say, could not resolve it before he died. What do you think it might have been?
Yeah, I'm feeling like the jealousy or like the worry from the father is probably the thing that is the most impactful here. I'm definitely feeling like there is a way to sort of look at this and say, oh, well, they split up the kingdom because it got too big, or they were worried about something like that. That's very, Tolkien sees the power and knows it needs to be disseminated, but no, he always goes with, the unification sort of ideal.
Well, it makes it very clear that this wasn't a decision that was like, oh, here's a good policy decision. It was owing to dissensions. Right. And then that's what triggered the Witch King coming up here, is because this is low-hanging fruit. So it was a bad idea.
This kind of feels like one of those, well, if you like it so much, why don't you just go rule the other place? And then he does, and then it's horrible and everything falls apart after like a dare after a night at a bar or something.
Well, I'd like to think it was something a little more serious than that, but you're right.
Probably a little more serious than that. Sure.
I'm sure they just had a difference of opinion as to how they should rule, as to what perhaps the threats were. It is possible that they were already geographically divided, that perhaps those areas of Rhudaur and Cardolan that would later become those might have been regions of Arnor that, were under the leadership of these princes to begin with, right?
Yeah. There feels as though there is some bad blood simmering.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of
definitely
like something underneath the surface.
Why would you usurp your brother and split off the kingdom?
Yeah.
Really, to very little advantage, especially those splinter kingdoms. I mean, Rhudaur and Cardolan don't have any of the power that Arthedain has.
Yeah.
As can be witnessed by the fact that they fall so much earlier. Even Cardolan, who remains mostly faithful. I mean, Rhudaur obviously is taken over by the evil men from the mountains, from the hillmen. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's bad enough. I kind of wish we knew how that happened. But Cardolan stayed sort of faithful. I mean, even when he goes to say, hey, I'm the last descendant of Isildur and I need to reunify the kingdom, Cardolan doesn't say no, right? Rhudaur opposes that claim. We don't hear what Cardolan says specifically, but they allied with him enough to form that frontier that would protect them against Rhudaur. So they're either on board with it or at least not totally opposed to it. And that's not that many generations after the original split.
Yeah, I'm getting the sense that there's probably a world that exists where if they are united, they can stop Sauron, or at the very least hold him back longer.
Well, that's the thing. Would they be facing off against Sauron, though? I mean, it's a good question.
Oh,
but they're in the north, and Sauron's in Mordor. So let's maybe think about it from that perspective. Of course, the Witch King comes up there because he sees them as weak. So does he go up there if he doesn't see them as weak? Maybe. Let's assume he does, because they've got to have some sort of foe, right? Yeah, I mean, united, certainly they're going to be stronger. I think they still need the help of the elves from Lindon and from Rivendell and from Círdan in order to survive against the Witch King's supernatural power. I mean, he's powered by a ring, so he's got more than any typical evil leader would have. Yeah, I definitely think they could have held out longer.
Yeah. And then what are the consequences of that? Do we get the Shire? Do we get the hobbits? I think we still get the Shire.
I still think we get the Shire. I mean, it was the King of Arthedain who gave it to them in the first place. And so therefore he would have been the King of Arnor if the realm had stayed united.
Okay.
Right? Because that kingship descended through that line, right? Cardolan and Rhudaur were the break-off ones. Arthedain is where the line of kings continued. So yeah, I think we can still get the Shire. But what are the other consequences? What happens when you have, instead of a king of Arthedain saying, I should be king of Gondor? What if he's the king of Arnor? Does Arvedui's claim carry more weight if he is the king of Arnor and not just the king of a successor realm?
I feel like probably yes, but
also probably no.
Yeah, with Tolkien, there's also a probably no aspect to this.
The steward, I can't remember off the top of my head which steward it was who basically advised them not to accept this claim, to reject this claim. I don't think he's going to change his mind. And I have a feeling, the idea of some king that is all the way up there that you've never met versus the guy who just saved your bacon, right? The guy who just won the war. You take the guy who's just won the war because he is still descended from kings. He's not in that direct bloodline, but he's related enough that they could accept him on the throne. So I don't think it changes it, even if it does give his claim more weight, more legitimacy. But yeah, I think they hold off against Angmar. I think they are more successful. The question is, are they ever able to reunite with Gondor before Aragorn? Right. I mean, the whole idea of the split with Arnor and Gondor wasn't really an official, like, we don't like you anymore. You go to your own kingdom.
It was very much
Remember,
gradual.
Gondor was founded separately by Isildur and Anarion because that's where they landed. And Elendil landed in the north, and so he formed Arnor. But they were united under Elendil until the Battle of the Last Alliance, the War of the Last Alliance, when he died. And now they're united under Isildur. He's the High King. But he does leave the kingship of Gondor, the leadership of Gondor, to his nephew, to Anarion's son, when he leaves to take the ring. And because of all the stuff that happened after that, it just never came back together.
It feels like almost a relationship that's sort of fizzled out and nobody wants to actually do the breakup. And they're like,
somebody in Gondor thinks Isildur ghosted them. And he's like, man, I got shot. I died. I'm not ghosting you. I'm dead.
Sorry, I was busy being
shot in the throat. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
Jesus.
Well, that's exactly what the text tells us happened. The poor guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's
the beacon on his
Tolkien
forehead, was a big, giant, shining spotlight for the orcs because the Elendil mirror that he was wearing.
Got to figure that out. Got to figure that part out.
Fantastic stuff. I love that whole story. We didn't even touch on this, but can I just tell you? I don't even know if you know this.
Yeah.
The creepy part of that was that the author of the text of that part of the story is saying, they only could have found the Elendil mirror, Saruman that is, could have only found the Elendil mirror if he found Isildur's body, right? If he found the bones, which leads to the question, what did he do with the bones? And the text suggests that he burned them, that he committed this great evil in desecrating the bones of Isildur, because there's no remnant of him. There's no indication that he was buried anywhere with honor. And that this would have been a really dark evil for Saruman to have committed.
That's so funny you say that, because about 6 months ago, I introduced the idea of Isildur's bones playing a part in my Middle-earth
did you? In the role-playing
TTRPG. Yeah. So long story short, my players might have removed Saruman from life.
Good.
In one way or another.
How in the world do they manage that? That's a
lot of critical successes and a lot of failures. A lot of failures here.
Yeah.
But Orthanc was theirs to explore, so I basically gave them free reign, and one of the things that they discovered on a critical success search was Isildur's bones and the chain, because there is that sort of backstory.
Well, the chain, they find the chain, right? Aragorn finds the chain and finds the Elendil mirror, little hidden doorway. But the bones were nowhere to be found, and that's Saruman.
Shame.
It just makes me think of all those terrible moments, like at the end of Scouring of the Shire, when he suggests that Wormtongue was awfully hungry.
I hate that part. Hate that part. No.
Oh,
Don't want it. Don't want it. Don't want to think about it.
On that
anyway,
terrible, disappointing note, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. But please be sure to come back next week when we look south to Gondor and the heirs of Anarion.
Yeah, nothing like a little civil war to brighten up this episode as we end on a wonderful note.
Yeah.
However, we will end on this lovely note because we do want to thank the members of Team PPP. That is editor Jordan Reynolds, who I don't have to apologize too much this episode because my mispronunciations were few and far between. We've also got Barleyman Becca Davis, social media manager Casey Hilsey, event and Patreon coordinator Katie McKenna, graphic artist Megan Collins, and website guru Phil Dean.
Now, please take a minute to check out theprancingponypodcast.com. It's where you're going to find our show notes, outtakes, Prancing Pony Ponderings, and our online storefront where you can get PPP merch, including all the really cool episode artwork that Megan's been doing for the last almost 3 seasons now.
You'll also want to visit our library page. The Prancing Pony Podcast is, after all, a podcast about the books. So if you're interested in any of the books that we have mentioned in the show, you will find a link for it in our library. We get a small amount of compensation when you make the purchase, and we do thank you for that.
And we also want to thank our patrons at the Círdan's contribution tier. I'll start with Demay in Alaska, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Joseph in Michigan, Kathy from North Carolina, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, Jerry from Washington, Joe in Washington, Erwin from the Netherlands, Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, Karen in the UK, June in Ireland, Zaksu in Illinois, Sarah in New Jersey, Joshua in Massachusetts, Lucy in Texas, and Keith in Alabama.
There's also Erica in Texas, Carson in Oklahoma, Vivian in California, James in Massachusetts, Anne in Kentucky, Sean in New Jersey, Mason in California, Maureen in Massachusetts, Olivia in London, Robert in Arizona, Nick in Wisconsin, Lewis in South Carolina, Thomas in Germany, Craig in California, Bailey in Texas, Kevin in Massachusetts, Julie in Washington, Bruce in California, and Joe in Maryland. Thank you all very much for your support.
Indeed. Thank you.
Also, make sure you do not miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony podcast. You can subscribe now through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcasting app.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your artifacts dating back to the beginning of the line of the Lords of Andunier. I mean, if you're going to ask big, right? To barliament@theprancingponypodcast.com.
And if you want your voice literally heard, you can send us audio of your questions. Visit podinbox.com/prancingponypod and record your questions for us. Please be sure, though, to still email the questions to Barliament.
That's right. Now, even though Barliament's been a lot more reliable lately, there is still a lot of mail to sort through, and we'll try to get to you just as soon as we're able. As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
I have been Don Marshall, the obscure Lord of the Rings facts guy, and this has been the man that is going to divide his podcast up into 3, the man of the West, Alan Sisto.